Right now,
Does it?
Hides the devil wings.
it takes about an hour,
And you have the YouTube on?
and I can't drive back because I'm like,
Are you ready?
I didn't know you were back from Hawaii yet, or ask us. You don't have to go in for the procedure. You just have to sit in the and have a conference call.
Text or email? Ooh,
Sorry, I did things.
it's a long one. All right.
I did my thing with attorneys and bond brokers and accountants.
All right, we ready to begin?
Then fired a guy.
All right. Welcome, everyone. It's time to begin. This is our Tocqueville City Council meeting, and it is 6 o'clock on the dot. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your presence, and thank you all that are going to be presenting to us today. Let's begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, and Councilman Williams, will you handle that for us? After which we'll have an opening prayer by Councilman Brainhurst.
Please call me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I got your mail.
Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for all you've done for us. Thank you for this beautiful valley that we have the opportunity to live in. Thank you for the opportunity we have to meet as a community and to discuss the needs of Tocqueville. Father, at this time we'd ask you that thou would guide and direct us so we'll be able to make decisions that are in the best interest of those that live here. We pray for rain. We pray for that moisture that we need to sustain us through the summer. We ask and plead with thee to bless us with that. Father, we ask and pray for thy Spirit to guide us and direct us, to help us and counsel us in those things that we need to decide. We ask and pray for these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Before we go any further, however, I want to say thank you to Afton and particularly Councilman Peart for the great work they did for our Easter event. It was well received, and I received many compliments on your behalf. So thank you all. Well done.
There are compliments to the Easter Bunny.
Yes, that bunny he was well dressed too, or she. I don't know if it's a he or she, but it doesn't matter because, well, yeah. One person told me the male version has laid as many eggs as the female version, so that's why it doesn't matter. All right, let's go forward. Let's have our as to the agenda. Are there any changes requested?
Motion that we approve the agenda as it stands.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. How about any disclosures and declarations of conflicts? Anybody have anything for today's hearing? Today's meeting? All right, let's go forward to our next item here. Review and possible approval of meeting minutes from February 2nd, February 16, and our business meeting, March 2nd, work meeting, March 16, business meeting, April 6th, and the work meeting. Everybody get a chance to review those? Any questions, concerns?
I don't know if April 6th was loaded or not.
Next one. All right, so
I move
scratch
that
the
we approve February 2nd, February 16th, March 2nd, and March 16th business meeting.
Second.
motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item, review and possible approval of the city expenditures for March of 2022. Any questions or concerns?
I haven't reviewed that. I didn't see it loaded.
I didn't see anything in the.
Actually, I did. I reviewed them myself, but did it come later? If you didn't review it, then we want to table that to the next one.
I checked just an hour ago and I don't think I
I
saw
didn't have it. It was empty folder.
Neither.
Me too, neither. Is that what you said?
it.
Well, I saw them there. I
You
know I did. Yes, but did I see them? Oh, you know what? Yes, I did, but it's in the It's in the general one. It's not under the, well, it is. The expenditures are there. Yeah, it's there. Shows expenditures totaling $99,090.26. Well, if
Pull that
no,
up real quick.
if
There's
no one
nothing
has-
outstanding, if there's nothing jumps off the page.
if you haven't had a chance to review it, I think we should table this until next month so you get the chance to review it.
All right, motion we table our expenditures for March.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll table that. Motion carries. So Daisy, make sure that we review next month, both March and April's, okay? All right, let's move on now. We have presentations, and I want to thank Sheriff Brooksby for being here with us and also Chief Gilday. They're going to just give us a kind of an overview of what things are going to be like here in the foreseeable future as we experience this bit of a change in Tokerville. Sheriff Brooksby, if you want to grab the mic, that'd be great. Thank you.
That'll work.
I think it's turned on and ready to go, but
Want me to be back here or come up front?
there's fine unless you want, if you want to come up front, you're welcome to do so as well, whatever you feel more comfortable.
I think I don't want to keep everybody's neck.
All right.
So just by way of introduction, my name is Nate Brooksby, so I'm the new Washington County Sheriff. How that happened, Sheriff Pulsford decided he could retire just short of finishing his third term as sheriff. So he's 11 years as sheriff, but due to health issues, he decided he would retire back in October. The undersheriff at the time, he had 25 years in, he decided to retire as well. So for about 6 weeks, Sheriff Pulsford made me the undersheriff, and there was a special election by the County Central Committee, and I had to win that with 76% of the vote. And because of the special election, I have to run in this year's election cycle. I found out last month I'm running unopposed, so I will be the sheriff until January 2027. So just some background there. I do have 26 years as in law enforcement in Washington County, 3 years with Washington City originally, and then 23 years with the sheriff's office now. And I've held every rank from deputy to sergeant to lieutenant to chief under sheriff for 6 weeks now, sheriff. So some happenings in Tokerville. So I just ran some stats for the last 12 months. So this is a total calls responded in Tokerville with 498 calls for service. And I just want to give a quick overview there. So we had 12 abandoned vehicle calls. So this would be alarms, so whether it's residential or business, we had 13. We had a total of, let's see, what's the next page? So anything animal related, so whether it's animal stray or an animal bite, total of 42 animal problem calls in the last 12 months, 14 calls for simple assaults.
What's a simple assault
Simple
versus
assault
a,
is a misdemeanor, so if I slapped you, that'd be a class B misdemeanor. If I broke your bones, that would be an aggravated third-degree felony.
No, we're in line.
So I guess there's pros and cons of that at least people are being gentle when they assault people. But we responded to a total of 16 of those. Citizen assist, this is a good one I like to see. So I always like to see that, well, my thought is that the sheriff's deputies have a better rapport with the community. So when I see things like citizens assist, that means they help somebody change a tire or maybe give them a couple gallons of gas so they can get to the gas station, help them cross some horses, things like that. So we had a total of 16 there. I'm sorry, citizen assist. 25 total. Criminal mischiefs, that would be like graffiti at a park or somebody breaks out your window. Total of 5. So that's good. That's not winning. So you do take in part of I-15 at the intersection there, so we get quite a few drug arrests in Tokerville, but the majority of Route I-15 just traffic stops with people passing through. So 23 incidents of drug offenses, 3 DUI arrests, and that's probably about it. And then a total, this is proactive, so a total of 270 citations that were issued within Tokerville in the last 12 months. So we have done a good job of checking in, I believe, with Town Hall. And anytime council members, the mayor, or citizens, if you have a special problem, we have a couple of deputies that their whole job is just to go out and be proactive. They're not necessarily handling calls for service. So people were blowing the stop sign on Ash Creek, or we invite Burge and Pocketville Road always have speeders on there, so we'll focus special attention there. And now lately with the new construction with the road coming in, apparently side-by-sides and motorcycle riders aren't doing very well about abiding by the signs up there. So we've been spending some extra patrol and attention to help combat that. Outside of that, so the sheriff's office, we have 173 employees. We operate off of a $24 million budget. I get to run a jail 24 hours a day. We house about 500 inmates. But some things that you might not be aware of that we offer Tokerville. So we have 5 full-time detectives. We're the lead agency of the Metro SWAT team. We're the lead agency of the bomb squad. So not only do you have patrol detectives, but you have a lot of specialty services that we can offer. Obviously, our detectives are, about 8 years ago, we had a homicide in Tokerville. I was out here till 26 hours straight from about 10 o'clock at night. We were able to arrest a suspect within about 18 hours of that happening. Some stars aligned, incredible stars aligned to make that arrest happen. We were able to pick him up very quickly, but it took us 25 hours to process the scene. So we had very well-trained, very well-equipped detectives that were helping out with a major incident like that. So, any particular questions?
No, well, any questions from city council members?
Do cougars count as animals?
Yes, and we do get a few hit up on I-15 too. Probably 20 years ago, I went up on a female that had and she was pristine. She was just a little trickle of blood coming out of her mouth, but to look at those paws, pretty impressive. So,
We've got one that lives up by Gary and I over on Westfield Road.
oh, do you?
Yeah, she's been very active.
I
A lot
know,
of ducks and chickens missing.
yeah, I have an employee that
Goats.
has trail cam set up not too far from here and just picked up quite a few cougars on the trail cam. So, any particular questions or concerns related to Tokerville or anything about operations of the sheriff's office? Everybody feeling good about it? Okay.
I'd like to personally thank you and your organization for the help that they've rendered here in this city. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, I know you're experiencing a lot of growth, and we'd like to grow with you. I've had some conversations with the mayor, and I'm never going to try to sell you something you don't need. So as time goes on, and we see a need to maybe increase services, we just want to grow with you, and yeah, I'm willing to lose money on the deal, basically. So,
Well, thank you,
I
Sheriff.
appreciate
Yeah, we do
coming out.
appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
for those that are in attendance here, if you don't mind, we've had conversations with the sheriff's department about increasing their presence here significantly, particularly as we begin some of that growth out on the other side of the hill here, just to make so that we can keep Tokerville quiet and comfortable. So thank you.
We
We
want to stay
appreciate
on
that.
top of it, because if it gets out of hand, it can get hard to rein in.
Yep.
So,
Thank you, Sheriff.
Appreciate you having me out.
Thank you.
Chief Gilday, thank you for being here with us today.
All right, good to be here. I'm Chief Gilday from the Hurricane Valley Fire District, Deputy Chief there. And we're excited about the growth in Tokerville and trying to maybe keep up with that as it comes into being. I'm exchanging emails pretty much every day with engineers and whatnot on different projects. Make sure that they've got their ducks in a row going forward. So the Hurricane Valley Fire District covers Tokerville. We cover all the way to Springdale, and we cover up to mile marker 36 on the freeway, Leeds, and we cover. We've been assigned by the state EMS to cover Washington City for ambulance up to Washington Parkway. And so everything in between that, we cover. We responded to over 4,000 calls for service for the first time last year. Our calls are steadily increasing district-wide, more than 10% a year. Probably the most exciting thing and biggest effect for Tokerville is that next Friday we hope to graduate 20 new recruits. And along with that, we will staff the station in Luverne that's been remodeled and has crew quarters now, and we are gonna staff that 24 hours a day with paramedic coverage. And so that will cut off about 5 minutes of your response time, roughly to most calls in Tokerville. So we're really excited about that. We have some new equipment coming. We have a brand new ambulance for there that has been ordered probably fully 2 years, I'd say.
Yeah, it's taken a long time to get equipment, isn't it? I mean, your order time is,
Yeah.
your delivery time is how long from your order time typically?
Well, typically it's around, for an ambulance, it's like 5 or 6 months. And with the pandemic and the shortages of this and that and labor shortages, it's been fully 2 years. And so anyway, we've had to make some adjustments. And we're good on ambulances now, but we got to adjust how we do business. We know we're gonna need one next year. We were gonna order one, but now we're gonna order it this year because it probably won't be here. I think the supply chain problems are aided, but they're definitely not gone away altogether. So as far as calls in Tokerville, we know houses burn here. We've had 2 good house fires in the last few years. And we had a really good fire at Anderson Junction, wildland fire. And we get wildland fires every year. Obviously, we're gearing up for this year. We expect that things are most likely going to be dry. We do have a wildland division, and that consists of 3 full-time people. And then we hire seasonal employees. And so they're available here, but they're also available anywhere in the West. If a state or a federal agency needs additional resources, we contract out our equipment and they go out. During the winter, our full-time crew does fuel for it. So generally that's paid for either by the county or the BLM or Forest Service. But we have equipment to clear land and to make fires a little bit easier to manage by taking care of the fuels ahead of time. And so that's what that fuels crew does. And that's a crew of 3, and they have a chipper, chainsaws, and they'll get contracts to clear mainly around towns and areas that are susceptible to more serious fires. So they stay busy all year round now. As far as calls, so far this year, we have, we're sitting at 47 calls in Tokerville for the first 3 months of the year. And last year, we totaled, or in 2020 rather, we totaled 208 calls in Tokerville. And last year, we dipped a little bit down to 183. Our computer is really good at picking up calls in Tokerville. It's not really good at picking up calls that are in your sphere of influence, like your portion of the freeway, and unincorporated county and things like that. So there's actually a few more calls than that in there. That's our calls right into Tokerville. But we're excited to have 24-hour coverage 5 minutes closer to you guys. I think that's the biggest news that we haven't had in a while, and that'll greatly improve your service. That's all I have. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Chief. Any questions to the city council members?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I don't know if you know that this year, but what's your impact fees going to do? Do we know? Are we still working on a study?
I do know a little bit about that. And you want to address it? You're kind of more with the driver than
It's just being started
still
now. The
working?
process
Okay.
is just getting started now, so it's still quite a ways out. I mean, right now the impact fee is what, 340 or
353.
353. Yeah, but
When we did that study, the numbers that we used, it cost $1.1 million to build a station. That was 6 years ago. And when we built just under 5 years ago, it ended up right over 2. And we expect now to build that same station would be over $3 million. So
No, I know it's gonna go up. I'm just curious if you guys knew if it was gonna be at 25 or 30% or where it
We
might.
just authorized last meeting, in fact, to update our study. from
Okay.
6 years ago.
That's all I had.
Anything else, anyone?
Keep up the good
Thanks,
work.
Chief. We appreciate your time.
Right.
By the way, for those that don't, oh,
Hey, Chief, what's the staffing gonna be in the equipment?
Most of the time, there'll be 4 there, 2 on an ambulance, 2 on an engine. And we'll be a captain at that station also, so you'll have a good full crew. And it's a paramedic coverage 24 hours. Past this class, they've been in academy for 2.5 months, and they're on the home stretch, and they'll be testing. And we hope to get all of them to pass all their tests, and then we can put them to work. Yeah. Well, our volunteer, honestly, the pandemic wiped our volunteers out because we couldn't get together for training. And so like our training was kind of remote. We had the lockdown stations. We didn't have anyone that was, like we did do station tours for 2 years. We did teach CPR class for almost 2 years. So they really kind of put a bend in our operations.
Chief, how many years you been with the department now here?
Here I've been full-time for 6 years and been doing different items for 3 years before that.
Those that don't know, Chief is just announced his retirement, can be retiring from us here before too long. Well, actually, I think it's already, is it effective already?
No, it's will be early part of May.
Okay, all right, but thank
I'll
you.
still be helping out, not every day.
Good for you. All right, thank you, Chief.
I don't know where our off button is on the bottom.
Oh, they can just go there. We're gonna have.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
All right, let's continue on our agenda here. The next section is our public forum. This is where anyone can stand up and speak as they will. If you do so, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and please state your address and full name. Anyone want to say anything? All right, seeing none, we'll move on now. The next item is a public hearing that we scheduled. And for those that aren't fully aware, a public hearing is a hearing within a public meeting. So it's a little different in that at this point is when we can hear from the public as it relates to the item listed. So I hereby declare our public hearing open. The purpose is to receive public input regarding the annual budget for fiscal year 2023. Let me make a further couple of statements. We are in the process of updating our general plan, which is required by state law. And we are soliciting information that would help us know what the public's feeling is about the general plan and where we should allocate some of our resources. So with that said, the public hearing is open. Does anyone like to speak on the matter? Seeing none, I hereby declare a public hearing closed. Let's go on now to our next item, which is our business section. First item is public input regarding the, not public input, it's discussion regarding the annual budget for fiscal year 2023. This would be for members of the city council. Afton, do you want to?
So this part right here, we're just going over some of our budget strategy. We've been, we're anticipating that going into the next year, obviously you heard from the fire department, from the sheriff's office, where the top 4 areas that we're looking at are public safety, parks and trails, recreation, and culture. And so we've been working really hard. Obviously, people know we've started to put in place 1 activity a month for culture and rec. On the public safety, we just wanted to kind of let you know kind of what we're looking at as far as with Washington County. We pay them currently $10,000 per year for that coverage that we get. And the coverage is 1 officer for 5 hours is what we get. And so we're actually thinking about upping that considerably just because of the new growth with the parkway, with the anticipated, homes being built over the next coming year. So we're anticipating we're proposing to move that from 10,000 to 60,000 is kind of what we're looking at. Obviously the fire department fees, those aren't, ours, those are done that way. So through the tax rate. Parks and trails, our top concerns there, we want to build Westfield Park. There's been lots of talk. Justin and I have met quite a bit. The Westfield Park is our number one. It's a capital facilities project. He got the park plan back. We're moving through that process. We are having a very, very difficult time getting contractors to even respond for estimates. So it's kind of a struggle on that. So that is our number one priority for capital facilities with parks. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The citizens of this town were successfully raised $50,000.
Yep.
We haven't spent that money on fun stuff here.
No.
Oh, no, it's in our, yeah. Yeah, that capital facilities budget is, yeah. Yeah, that park is gonna be several $100,000. I mean, it won't be 50. It'll be closer to, three to four. Justin thinks we can do it for 250. I'm saying 3 to 4. So that's where I am. But so we have the funds there. We're ready. We've got the plan. So we're ready to go. So we're going to see if we can we'd like to build it just all at once. We have to actually have a couple. So that's number one for capital facilities. We've talked to Jared Bates, who's an engineer, about some trails that we could start with, maybe just some active trails first in the wash that's up here. We've talked about some different, obviously, we went to the meeting at Confluence to see about the regional trail. Our recreation, we had a budget of $8,700, and we're thinking that we'll probably need to up that budget from $12,000. None of these are going to be due to increases in, so the culture and rec budget, that's just going to be a reallocation of funds. We have some other departments that were a little bit less, and one of those was parks, so of the maintenance and things like that. So we might do that. The other thing is we're trying to get recreation self-funded. That's why we started doing the farmers market that we're going to have. We're running those 10 by 10 spaces. Our target is 30. Those spaces are filling up very quickly. So that is obviously that's going to be out on the lawn here on the 30. And so we're talking about maybe opening up some of the sidewalk spaces. The goal for that is to get to $1,000 every time that we do that over 6 months, so that will fund half of the recreation budget of $12,000. The other $8,700 is already in the budget under recreation. So that's some we're planning. Daisy, do you want to just pull up the presentation from Greater Zion? We got these numbers from Greater Zion. And then, so this one right here, if you just want to, pull that up. So just on this first one, when you skip to that one, this is just kind of some of the things some of the reasons that we're trying to focus on this. When we did our spring social, we got back 51 survey responses. 49 of those said that they would like to see us focus on culture and recreation. A lot of them had things like Little League. They had things for 14-year-olds. Some said, some just said lower the price of diesel. I was like, okay. So, but a lot of them were things that they wanted to see us do. We asked, would you see sports? Would you like to see us redesign historic downtown, offer movies in the park, maybe have an art festival, do a 5K/Mayor's Walk? Would you like to see us do emergency preparedness classes? And then we asked 3 emergency preparedness, just saying, do you have 3 days of water stored, 3 days of food stored? Do you have any family emergency? And then we asked for suggestion. They asked for email lists of our events that we're doing so that they don't have to just check social media. So, but out of that, they were split almost 50 of redesigning historic downtown, but almost every other one came back, and I'm sure they just went down, but almost every other one came back with yes on recreation. So we know, even without redoing the general plan, that people do want to see us spend our money on culture and recreation. So that's kind of the one area that we could see in the budget that was super deficient that we were going to add to. So So that's kind of, so we were just hoping just with strategy that we could see it. These are some things that they've just said when Greater Zion, we looked at theirs and they just said some of it improves the benefits of community. It improves quality of life for residents and visitors. It has positive economic impact, and it raises the profile of the community. We checked with, they said that a lot of theirs are actually run by, obviously they have royalty too, or it's run by high school students, after school jobs and things like that, or filling in. So we might move into if we end up in some youth sports or things. A couple of the uses that we were thinking for our budget area, if you want to just go to the next one, Days. This is talking about the visitation numbers. These came from Greater Zion. They don't have the numbers. They didn't have the numbers up for 2021. So this is just 2019 and 2020. And they were just showing that numbers, that it's on the rise to our area, that tourism is definitely coming up. Zion was actually down. That was in 2020. So that was, the year of COVID. So that one went down. It went way back up last year, they said. But so those are some statistics. Specific to us, things that we have, of why we would like to focus on Parks and Rec and culture and trails is obviously planning for the future, something for the youth to do, the regional trail system, the reservoirs coming in, and then just planning for growth. Two things that we wanted to get some feedback about at the next meeting, which will be on May 18th. We're working with the water district to see about the possibility of putting turf at TRE. We want to see how people feel about that maybe that could turn into some sort of a soccer park. The district has asked if we could find areas that we could maybe remove and replace or, things. So that was one idea that we had, the possibility of also doing that at Center Street for baseball, and then considering a splash pad at Center Street. So anyway, so that's where we are with that. So thanks.
All right, let's move on to item number 2, discussion and possible action on the annual fraud risk assessment. Afton, why don't you give us some insight there?
This one is just the one that we do for the state auditor. It actually doesn't need, this is just kind of more informational. It's just our fraud risk assessment. It says how we're doing internally and they score us. Originally, we thought we had a score. It's out of, it tells you, Daisy, do you want to just pull that one up real quick? If you just pull it up and just scroll through there, it's just kind of what we used so you can see, it'll go to that's the guideline of how you score yourself right there. So this is just our fraud risk assessment. And this just tells us internally kind of what we're doing. It talks about lots of different categories from our policies and procedures, talks about the way that we do cash receipting and things, our required commitment of ethical behavior. That's why we implemented this year the Municipal Ethics Act, and just how we adopt and put those into there. Our score when we first did it was we thought it was coming at 338, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, 338. And then we went through it with Candace, our accounting assistants, and we're actually closer to 353. So we have a low, 355 is the very lowest. So we're at a low to very low risk assessment for anything fraud. We've met with the trust and our insurance is in line and everything. So this is just kind of just informative, just a discussion to let you know where we are with that. So
Questions?
So our risk is low, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
All that?
low to very low. Low. Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to item number 3, discussion on updating our ordinance, our grading ordinance. For this, Afton has asked Mayor Rick Rosenberg from Santa Clara to come and speak to us a little bit about that. So I'll turn over to you, Afton, then you guys, I don't know what your plan is here, but Mayor, thank you.
So when we were redoing our uniform fee schedule, and when we were doing that, we took a look at our grading ordinance, right? When we were looking at our land use violations and land use fees. And in order to do that, we had to update our grading ordinance. We went to Rick, he's obviously the mayor of Santa Clara, but he's also a civil engineer. And Santa Clara has kind of gone through some of these same growing pains. So we thought if we could shortcut that process and kind of figure that out and find some of these. So our grading ordinance currently says that you cannot pull a grading permit until after you have a final plat approval. We thought that might be a little too restrictive, I guess would be the word. So we went to Rick. We've gone through it a couple of different times, thought we had something that maybe worked. We ran it by our attorney. We ran it by Bruce Jenkins. And he had some verbiage from the city of St. George that we tried to include. It kind of didn't fit with what we were doing. So rather than Darren and I just, saying our thoughts and going back and forth, we met with Joey, we went to Rosenberg. So we've met with engineers, attorneys. And so finally we just thought, well, we'll just have them come over here and talk to us. So here's where we are.
Are they both the same except one with the proposed changes?
Yeah, so we call the draft. So the draft is what was, so there was a draft. And then you'll see, yeah. And so that had the red lines in it.
Other one's a clean
Part
version.
right here, yeah, and then there's a clean version of it. But the red is,
Okay,
so the red is,
See the modifications.
yeah,
Or the
that's right
deletion.
there.
okay, that's what I wanted to.
This one chunk right here was from, what we pulled up from West James, the city of St. George, just through our attorney. But this
Okay.
kind of doesn't fit with what we're doing, so we'll just go.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate being here tonight. Apton asked me to look at this ordinance and give my opinion, based on the experience on both sides of the table, on the engineering side of the table for over 35 years. And I've sat in the mayor's chair waiting for somebody else to run for almost 20. So, and that's kind of what we've done. With the exception of that one paragraph, and we can just go through the red line. The first page, the only red line on it is the definition of the zoning administrator. You have a new position now. Before this was done, I think, by the building inspector, and so you've transferred the ability for grading permits and regulation on grading permits to the zoning administrator, and this is just the definition of that. If you go to the next page is where the biggest changes are. When Afton came and talked to me about it, there was some concern about requiring a site plan approval or a final preliminary plat approval, or a final plat, before a grading permit could be issued. What a lot of cities do, and let me start out by saying they're all different. Almost every community down here is a different process in order to get a permit to disturb land or do grading on land. Some of them are very simple. Some of them are extremely complex. Washington City has a manual, a 51-page manual on how to get your permit. And it refers to other manuals that are probably 50 pages apiece as well. You can get into the weeds deep on a grading permit, or you can make it fairly simple. What we tried to do with this one was to not be on one end or the other, but to kind of be in the middle and try and take a logical and a reasonable approach to it. Instead of requiring a final site plan approval, we require site plan review and we require preliminary plat approval. So before anybody could get permission to grade on property, they would have to go through a plan review process to where the city would have to take action, either in the form of a site plan for a commercial project or a hotel or something like that, or a preliminary plat approval like for a subdivision or a townhome project or something like that that's going to be sold. The final plat for a subdivision is the title conveyance document. That's how that property is set up so title can be conveyed from the owner to a purchaser. It doesn't have a lot to do with grading. The preliminary plat approval requires a lot of information to be submitted for the city to review, including utility design, all of your grading, like your finished grading, your existing contours. It shows your areas of disturbance. It shows your roadways, how the property is going to be accessed, if it's going to be sold, how that's going to happen. There's a lot of information that is provided to the city and reviewed by your staff, your planning commission, and your city council. And the ordinance covers most of that already. We'd require them to have that preliminary plat approval before a grading permit could be issued. But the biggest thing is making them go through a city review. and a city review that has some detailed engineering to it, so that we know what the existing ground looks like. We know if there's any sensitive areas out there, any wetlands, any hillside concerns. All of that's covered in that. We know what the finished surfaces are going to be. So we know what if there's going to be large retaining walls or cut slopes or fill slopes. We know what those are going to be. We're going to require geotech report a little bit further on. We're going into all the detail that basically justifies the subdivision approval or the site plan approval. That same level of detail, but not take it to the point that you have to prepare the land conveyance document before you can start grading. This number one up there, the section that came from City of St. George. If you aren't working with St. George City right now, they're going through a transition. They've replaced the legal department pretty much entirely. They've got, seem like they're hiring a new attorney every day. And they're coming from up north. They're coming from Summit County, Park City, some of the, I call them highly regulated areas. And that's the new face of St. George. We've got, and Scott's, we've got a lot of projects that are going through St. George Review now that have just suddenly come to a halt. They've stopped. And we're trying to, the staff up there is trying to figure out what they can do and what they can't do before they approve a project. This section requires basically everything that you would have to do to record the final plat in order to get a grading permit, including bonding for all the documents. So it's, that in my mind is really restrictive. That's gone over on the highly restrictive side. And that's a section that I don't really support. There's some bonding requirements in here. Most of that section talks about bonding. We've got bonding in your ordinance already a little bit later, so let's kind of keep going. There's exemptions that have been put, whoops, don't jump too fast. This is important. The exemptions are when you don't need to get a grading permit. So if you're doing one of these things, you don't need to go through this process. If you're doing agricultural grading, excavation, filling for agricultural purposes, you're not asking for a building permit. You're farming, you're grading property to make the water work better. You're doing those types of activities. It's exempt from the grading permit. If you're doing residential landscaping, if I'm going to go around and landscape my yard, I don't need to get a grading permit to make that happen. Come on down for me. If I'm not disturbing the grade out there when I'm doing this grading, I'm not disturbing any grade more than 2,000 square feet. So it's a very small area that's going to be disturbed. It can be exempt from the grading permit. Public facility projects. You're building Toker Highway, what's it called? Tokerville Parkway. And you've seen the amount of grading that's happening as part of that project. We've exempted, at least I've recommended that you exempt public facilities from having to do that. Those projects have gone through extensive city review as part of the project design, as part of the bid. The contractor's working for you. Contractor has, if he had to go through a grading permit process, it could slow him down months, which is going to cost you money as a public entity. Also covers all of your utility work out there. You guys are going to be seeing a bunch of future utility expansion, replacement. All of that would be exempt from a grading permit. So you didn't have to go through that process as part of those things. So those 4 items are the exemptions. You're getting the grading permit to grade the land.
On the agricultural side of that, we have a lot of agricultural land in Tokerville, like by default, if they zone that. And that right there allows those people that if it's zoned ag, they feel like they can just move forward by doing whatever they want. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Go back up to that, please.
It's actually grading for water or fixing drainage and stuff like that.
If it's the ag use or not.
They can take that and say, well, it's ag, we can grade it off.
But the grading has to be associated with the agricultural use. If they're doing grading on agricultural property for a non-ag use, they still need a grading permit. That doesn't qualify for the exemption.
sentence there says, grading, excavation, etc. associated with non-agricultural uses or construction in an agricultural zone shall require a grading permit. So,
Just needed to read more.
yeah, just last sentence. Yeah, you can't say, oh, it's zoned ag, so we can go and grade it in preparation to build apartments out there once we rezone it, but we'll wait to rezone until after we do all the grading. No, if it's for non-agricultural purposes, still have to get a permit.
The other thing that's kicked in is that before you can apply for those approvals, it has to be zoned appropriately. And any other conditions of a development agreement or any other land use entitlement would have to already be in place as well. That answer your question, Tim? Okay, come on down to that next section. I mean, the grading permit is for the grading plan, and you can't use it for, off-site improvements or on-site improvements that are beyond the grading. The grading permit is for that grading plan that you've presented. A detailed grading plan shows a couple of things. The area of disturbance, so the total area that you're going to be disturbing, and the location of that area. It's going to show the existing ground topography, the ground contours of that site as it exists today, and it's going to show the proposed future condition when the grading is completed. So you can look at that grading plan and you can determine if there's impacts to any existing drainages, or as a result of that grading, will there be impacts to adjacent properties? The purpose of the grading permit is to protect the property and the adjacent properties in the city from any problems that can result as a result of that grading, by completing that grading. And there's a lot of examples out there of doing grading poorly and the negative impacts it has on adjacent properties, upstream and downstream, and sensitive areas, and even the property itself. And so it's for that grading, and it has to be in accordance with that grading plan. They can't go beyond that grading plan. Before they could start, for example, it comes in and we get a preliminary plan approved and he applies for a grading permit, he will have a detailed grading plan showing all the information that we need and all the studies required before he can start grading. That doesn't mean he can start his water line or his roadway. Those plans have to come right in behind it before you can start those improvements. It only involves the grading. The application process, as you're going down through a detailed grading plan, we've updated the code reference. The ordinance right now has a previous code reference in it, and so we've updated it to the new code res so that it's current. We're showing all the areas that are going to be disturbed, and if you've got a waste area, was what we call them, say you generate more excavation on a site than you have place for fill, you're going to waste it at some location, that has to be included in the permit. So you've identified that waste area, and how it's going to be graded and how it's going to be maintained is also in there. We're requiring the soils engineering and the geology study report. An engineer worth his salt won't do a grading plan without one of these in Washington County. I've told people for 30 years there's two kinds of soils here. There's bad soils and there's really bad soils. And they will haunt you if you don't pay attention to them. And we've got case after case after case. One of my partners makes a really good living doing distress. That's all he does is distress studies. And he makes a good living at it because they don't pay attention to what's in the soils engineering and the geology report, or they're not familiar with the problems that blue clays and collapsible soils and all those fun things have on a site when you go to build on it. So we want that report for, the biggest reason I ask for it to be completed as part of the process is to make sure it's done, that report exists, because we have a lot of projects that want to move forward without that report existing. And then they try and catch up with it. Well, when you do the grading and you don't know what the soil is, you're spinning the revolver. I mean, you're taking a chance. And so we want that of record. We want them to be able, for the city staff to be able to look at that. all those reports have grading recommendations. If there's problem soils, they'll point them out and they'll tell you how to mitigate them, what you should be doing to mitigate the impacts of them on the development. And you can see that in the development of the grading plan. Proof of ownership. We want to make sure they own the property. And that comes up more than you think it would. Pan down for me. Yes.
Because when you requiring that geotech report, and the developer kind of knows the depths he's going to wanting to go preliminary on those test pits, do you require those to be as deep as they're proposing or their conceptual proposal?
What I typically do in my reviews is when I'll look at the grading and see how deep they're going, and make sure the grading or the geotechnical report has gone deeper than that. When the soils guy does it, they typically will ask the applicant, what's your proposed use? What do you think is going to happen out there? And if we understand up front that there's a lot of up and down on this side, and there could be some cut and fill, and we'll get it, we may have up to a 10-foot cut. Well, we'll want to make sure that soils boring is probably, 20, 25 feet deep, because the blue, and even deeper in the blues, a blue clay soil can have an impact, within 25 feet of the top of it. So depending on, what's on top, if you had a blue clay like in Santa Clara, we've got them everywhere. The whole city is underlaid by blue clay. And so it's really important that we know what's within 25 feet of that proposed finished grade. If we've got blue clay 12 feet from the finished grade, then they either have to put 13 feet on top of it or go get it, dig it out, and then put 20 feet of good material in between. Or they have to go to a deep foundation, which is acceptable, but the construction cost goes way up, and it's identified up front. So before you even get your preliminary plat approved, what your foundations are going to be looking like. That lets the developer, the applicant, be able to determine his construction costs long term. He's not going to get shocked once he starts grading out there and he finds some of this stuff.
You have the approval of the preliminary plat, but then you need to have, basically the grading permit, grading plan shouldn't go outside the boundaries of that preliminary plat.
No. Not unless they've got, what I would probably recommend is if you're going to have a borrow area offsite, the borrow area needs to be approved either as part of the preliminary plat or a subsequent action before you start grading, so that all the disturbed areas have been studied and considered.
As for depth of hits and trenches, what about hitting refusal?
Yeah, refusal, and the geotechs they know how to write that stuff. If you're hitting the lava cap or something like that, then obviously you're not going to go down in there. You're looking for that problem soil. Once you've found it, the rock caps have, and refusal has a similar restriction now that'll come into your grading plan. You'll work out where you're not leaving half cut and half fill on a rock site, because you'll have problems there too. And those will be in the recommendation section. We just want to go far enough that they know what they're dealing with, and that they've made the attempt to mitigate it as part of that plan development. Test pits would be on the plan, so you'd be able to see where they were. You'd have the borings in the geotech report, so you could look at it and get a pretty good idea of what's under the ground.
Do you feel comfortable that one sentence on item number 2 covers what we've just discussed here?
Go back to item number 2. If you wanted to, I feel comfortable with that one. And what I'm doing is everything in this study has to be submitted by a registered professional engineer licensed in the state of Utah. So there are different, that's a nice way to say this. Yeah, there are
Areas expected.
yes.
We can't discriminate against one engineer to the next. If they're licensed in the state of Utah, we have to take
I think we have to trust that staff will look at things like what is going to be the final elevation and how deep that geotech report should have been if it's not what it is, and make them go back and.
Yeah, there's been plenty of times when I get a report that's not covering or I have a question. And sometimes they've left it out unintentionally or whatever, and they'll just, oh yeah.
All right. Thank you.
The industry has a standard of care for those types of documents. And most of the guys here stay within that standard of care. They get burned often enough that they're burned to stay within that standard of care. If you wanted to beef that section up, I would say do it in your design standards. Add a paragraph in your design standards that affect everything in the city and specify the detailed requirements you want in a soils or geotechnical report. So it's not just on any one grading permit, it's covering everything that you're doing inside the city. Number 4, additional information. This is, if you got a complex grading project out there, and you've got some that are right in front of you right now, you may want some additional information to go along as part of that review. Drainage study is really important on a large grading project because you're impacting the natural flow of water across the site. You could be changing if it's a permeable to non-permeable when you do the grading. You're going to have a lot of impacts on the surface runoff from the site. And you need to understand what those are as part of your grading permit. Have you got retention facilities designed that are adequate for what you need? Do you have diversions and berms in the right places so that you can protect your waterways and your downstream conditions? And we go into a little bit of that in more as we get into this. Dust control plans, really important. If you're going to do mass grading, that you're going to grade an area and then it may sit there for a year, that you prepare that surface so that it's not a constant nuisance for everybody in the city. The wind blows here, as you guys know that probably better than anybody else in the county, that the wind blows here. And you don't want the smog remedies, right? There you go. You just don't want the area on this side of town moving to this side of town overnight. That's right. So we made some changes there. Zoning administrator, you see that anywhere there's building department, you can come on down. Inspections, you're still doing the inspections, you're still doing the review, you're still requiring the fees to do the grading plan reviews. This one kind of goes into the bond, when a bond is going to be required. And doesn't necessarily require a bond on everything, but if any of these items in here get hit, then you're going to require a grading bond. And it's really a restoration bond. It's something that would allow if a developer and applicant started a project and got halfway in and shut it down. And if you were here in 2008 and 9, you saw that a lot. Where the projects got started, the land got disturbed, the market dried up, recession hit, they ran out of money, and they just stopped. The bond would do a couple things. It could finish the project grading so that it got built in accordance with the plan, so that all of those things that were in the plan to protect adjacent properties, downstream properties, were built and finished. So it could sit there for a little while. If you have off-site things, the bond is really to protect the impacts that happen as a result of the grading. Not to guarantee that this hotel I just got permitted for is going to get built, but that the grading you've allowed me to do is going to get completed to protect the adjacent properties, the site itself, city facilities, those types of things that are associated with that work. Exactly. We don't want anything to stop midstream and then have a storm hit and all that soil gets washed down on the adjacent property. Huge. They do a lot of it here with, compaction, surface compaction. They wet it, they compact it. There's dust control treatments. Back east, this would be a vegetative type curtain, but It don't rain enough here to grow anything. Euclid is part of the grading permit. Sure.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so there is some things that change that way.
Well,
And
and in a complex or a mass grading situation, it says that you can have, one of the things that staff requires a restoration plan. So how are you going to restore it? And if one of the ways you're going to restore is with soil binders and stuff like that, that would be part of that plan.
Yeah, the only other thing is, question, I guess, is there a recommendation on what type of bond? Is that a cash bond?
Yeah, keep going. That's going to be up to the city bonding, but I think we cover that next page.
Mine is on the,
Right there, in black above the number.
ours says 100, and we had talked about maybe doing 125%.
I mean, and that's totally the city council. I would recommend some type of an inflation factor, just because if you figure a 6-month grading project, how much have prices changed in the last 6 months? The engineer's estimate, to get a bond, you're gonna ask for an engineer's estimate of the cost. So what does it cost to do this work that I'm asking permission to do? He's gonna look at it in today's dollars and say, today it's gonna cost this much to do that. We use 25% in Santa Clara. Some of them use 15. That's really up to the city. He understands, the applicant understands, whatever he doesn't spend, he's going to get back. You don't get to keep that. That's just a guarantee bond that you've got the money in case they walk away. I've got a project right now. It's the first time and I've got a project as mayor, where we allowed a developer to record a plat without the improvements being done. And we required him to post a bond, a 25% bond. And we release that bond as he gets work done. Well, he hired the slowest contractor in the world to do that. And he's in year 3. And I've got this 3-year-old cash bond in the check. And I open the safe once in a while and dole out a little bit of money to him. But it scared me to the point that right now we update the engineer's estimate every time he asks for a release. If the remaining bond funds cover the estimate, he can have the excess. So every time he asks for a release, we update that. He's asked for 2 release he didn't get because the construction costs went up and he didn't have the money in the release. So
This section refers to 10.5.3, which is our section on security for completion of improvements. So we're requiring them to post this bond in the same amount and in the same way as we allow, and it is 125%. So
do you still allow your bonds? And you know why I'm asking.
It's gonna do 120% cash bond, so they'll just do a bond.
Yeah, that's the question is the problem with a surety bond, and Heath can tell you, enforcing calling a bond is a nightmare for the city.
Our firm has represented the city of St. George like on 3 or 4 different, having to call the bond due, and bonding surety companies refuse to pay, and so we've had to sue them for the city of St. George. So it's not the easiest way. I would much prefer cash on deposit. Yes. Yep.
And a lot of the cities are going to that. They've taken the ability to bond with a surety bond out of it. You can still do a cash bond or a letter of credit.
In that instance, I might suggest us coming more in line, closer to 100%. I understand that there could be costs can increase, and that's why you're hedging, why you're saying 125, because over time, what was going to be this cost could be 125% of that. However, you're going to get developers who, if we're still, I think that if we want to go cash on deposit, it may need to be something closer, more in line with 100 and maybe 110%, so that it's not a huge disincentive. Think about what the premium cost, the premium for a bond is.
I must not
Surety
understand
bond.
that we have to borrow twice as much money, the 100% to build it and 100% for
No.
backup. So how does this work?
We have a cash on deposit agreement.
It says that it can be
Percentage?
No, you can withdraw.
You can draw it down.
You can draw it down. Like state
Oh, yeah.
I haven't done that yet, I see.
You draw it down, pay your subs, get a release as you go.
In our ordinance, in our performance bond, it's 125%. Once they've completed the improvement, we agree that 100% can be released, and the other 25 is held as a warranty bond during the warranty period.
So your construction loan basically goes into a bond.
Exactly.
Into a deposit account at the same bank that gave the loan. They sign off on the agreement saying that we have to approve the release, the city has to approve the release.
It's another layer of protection for them. The city's saying it got done. The funds are. On-site drainage structures, anytime where you connect to the city storm drain from your drainage system, we're going to want to look at that. The city's going to look at that to protect your system from sediment, from increased discharge. One thing that can happen when you grade a site is that you're going to lose your vegetative cover. So your runoff, your water runoff from that site during a storm is going to increase. So you're going to have more water, more volume, and it's going to come faster and bring sediment with it. And so all your drainage facilities have to be looked at to make sure that they're big enough and make sure you've got the detention facilities in the right places so that you don't negatively impact your existing system. Anything that's going to increase potential sediment transport, that's really important. It's really dependent on the soils of the site. A lot of the soils over here you can erode with a garden hose. So you can move sediment all over the place. So you got to be careful with that. We want to be able to look at that or have your staff be able to look at that. Anything that's going to create a public safety risk, deep trenches, deep cuts or deep fills, those types of things can be a public safety hazard if they're not finished properly. So we want to make sure they're looked at. And then we've kind of got this catch-all in the end where the zoning administrator can look at it to protect the residents and public facilities of the city if he wants something special for that. And then you talk about the cash bond. So the bonding that was described in that section 1 of the front is in there. And I think it's in better detail here. And it fits into your ordinance a little bit better. So anyway.
Same with Santa Clara. You guys put all of that responsibility.
We don't have a city engineer either. We have a contract engineer, kind of really similar to Tokerville. And so it's on the team, I'll call them, of our planning administrator and our building inspector. And then our, that's how they were doing it. I'm not going to tell you that it's exactly the way it's covered in the ordinance, but we're changing ours too. So you're always, two things about ordinances, kind of like bad soils, is you've got an ordinance that you're going to change today and one you're going to change tomorrow. And those are the only two ordinances there are. It's
To zoning department, or planning and zoning department, and then it's more of a kind of.
I guess my question is, why would we have that in zoning? It's one of the questions I wrote down. It's more of a,
Are you thinking like?
it's more like a building side or a public works item, right?
What do you think?
Ty, it can be whoever you want to designate it to be.
Sure. You could reassign it as.
So Rick, a couple things that I saw, and again, thank you. There's that's a ton of information. So one of the things that we see quite a bit of happening in Washington and St. George is those big super pads that get built. This didn't really address that I saw. Is there a way to accommodate somebody to go build a 10-acre pad that can be developed in the future, but that is their development plan?
Take it through the site plan review, and the site plan is basically the grading path.
So then that takes me back. When we started the conversation, I felt like you gave a pretty good description of what was needed to get a grading plan, which was almost a complete set of plans. Like it had to have utilities, had to have all those things identified. But at that point, if all those things are done, they basically handled it. So they're just not getting all the signatures on them at that point. The signature they're gonna go for is as it's run the zoning administrator. And they're gonna take time and just review high level, look, they got water, they got sewer, this is how everything's gonna fit. We'll sign off on the grading plan. So that's how they would do that, just show.
Well, that's the preliminary plat version that you were talking
Yeah,
about.
that's preliminary plat
There's also
version.
another version,
You've got,
the site plan version.
Yeah.
you can do a site plan for where you're basically gonna look at master plan utility corridors.
Okay.
Master plan roadways. Any zoning criteria that could be looked at as part of that site. And then you're still gonna require that detailed set of grading plans. This would be like the super pads at milepost 2 in St. George. They got the zoning in place before they started integrating down there. The roadways were master planned and in some cases built. So they knew where the street frontages were. All the utility corridors were thought through, so they knew where the utility corridors were. A master drainage study was done, so they knew how the offsite flows impacted this property and how this property impacted the flows that left the site and how the detention was set up on the site. So basically, you've answered all the real questions. Yeah, you may not know what the TVC elevation is at that fire hydrant, but you know where the roads are, you know where the utilities are, you know how the drainage works. You've got the geotechnical report, you know how the soils is, you've got a detailed grading plan, there's your elevations, flow directions, ditches, berms, slopes, whatever they need, walls if they need it, you can have an idea for that.
So like, those mega pads, they've got big old detention basins, and when an end user comes and builds a big box or something, that detention basin might get moved over here, it might get moved over there, but it'll be accommodated.
They have to go through that as every step they go forward, like the pad grading happened, set there for recession. The terrible hearse comes along. It has to go through all of the detailed engineering plans and include the impact it has on the super pad and mitigate those concerns. Next one does the same thing.
So that answers that. Then just because of what we're working on right now, Parkway, and Rick, I probably didn't read enough, so I apologize. Did it talk about a cultural survey in there as part of that as well?
That's something that staff may require.
Okay.
I think, except for isn't there one down at the bottom too?
I was looking to see if it was
Something coming, and it's probably covered in another.
Historic or
ordinance.
prehistoric ruins. Grading plans shall include all such historic and prehistoric areas on the site shown to keep the measures that will be taken to protect such areas.
So I think we can.
One thing,
Doesn't necessarily say.
I think I'd rather change that to identify that I want a cultural study done.
Okay, so up further, there is the section of things that can be required.
you can ask for one, but one thing that's probably not in there, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a mandate that you do this study to determine if anything's there. Like with the this project has UDOT federal funds.
So no federal
So
funds.
there's a mandate that they do the cultural study within that disturbed area.
So, and that's what I'm getting, there wasn't, none of that was mandated, that those funds were given to the city through the legislation, and then we did that, but we knew that there was stuff there, and that's why we procured getting that done. And I just, we're gonna run it out over and over in Tocqueville, and I just wanna make sure that there's a mechanism in there so that we can.
You could add that in that
Yeah.
additional study section.
Yep, that's right. Under, on page 2, I believe it is, A4, where it says additional information, it's right at the very top of the page. Additional information that may be required by the zoning administrator for complex grading projects. And that says drainage studies, stormwater pollution protection plans, dust control plans, and restoration
You could
plans.
add cultural resources.
Put cultural resource right there.
And SHPO.
Yep.
Understand that's a cost on a smaller project.
I just know we didn't spend like, at the scheme, the end of it, I think we wrote a check for $5,000. Is that about right for what that cultural study was? So I'm like, and the assurance it gave us of identifying what was there, knowing that we needed to take cautions with it was worth.
Would you require one on the 4-lot subdivision down
Well, that's
here?
probably
Because
not
it'll be
if we knew what
about
it was.
the same price.
Yeah, it would be the same price, exactly.
And then we had to do a full meet for BLM right away.
Yeah,
Which was a set, that was a $30,000.
I think the big projects, road projects, usually the funding source will kick that requirement in. It would be the smaller subdivision projects. Do you want to make, if you have enough of that out here, then say yes. If
So
you
Rick,
have-
your suggestion would just leave it how it is. Staff would be responsible to make sure, oh wait, we know where this is at. We should probably address this, require it. Okay.
You kind of have either a knowledge based on what you know is here. Or you could make a call to, a couple of guys and they could tell you, yeah, you've probably got some stuff there and then require.
That section 4, the way it reads, it says that the zoning administrator can require additional studies or documents, such as, but it doesn't intend to be conclusive of all the types of things. And so whether we add it or the zoning administrator just says, I know there's, a pit house out there, I want a cultural resources study done. He can do that because it gives him big and larger complex type projects. He can require whatever he wants.
That's your policy.
Sure.
So, but if there's a cultural resource on private land in Utah, isn't that? That's tricky, isn't it?
It's tricky, but if the city wants it protected, then they can,
Well, that's-
they can require that as a condition of approval, land use approvals.
And Scott, that's what we're doing right now. I mean, that the parkway is on private land, and we're choosing as a city to save those.
Right, but we're doing that kind of without a formal process.
Without the formal process.
So
Do you want that word put in on number 4 too?
I'll take Rick's recommendation on that.
We may have some other issues comes up. Maybe there's wetland vegetation.
We'd love to have some wetlands.
Be careful what you ask. If wetlands to me are way different than what it looks like I know right
I got it.
I'm still struggling to figure out why they call a couple things up there with wetlands. So, yeah, but you can, if you know that there's a seed, there's this type of vegetation, you can ask for that to be looked at as well.
Then in your review, has it covered what you would want to see in there?
I think we probably put other, I would keep it a little more version there, specifically about culture.
Resource and
And then what was your take on,
City
let's
discretion.
see, Rick, I think you said that it's on page 2, the paragraph, didn't you, that's one that we scalped from St. George City, right?
yeah, that
What was your
paragraph,
take on that,
I
David?
would
I would delete that.
delete that. Excellent.
I think most developers would, if they're wanting to build the improvements prior to, so that they don't have to bond for the improvements, why would we make them pay and bond only before they can start to grade and build the improvements? It just seems way excessive.
On the first sentence, a hotel may not require a final plat.
Mm-mm.
Not in our plan.
Well, and that's the same thing with the final plat, I think the final plat we're talking about, or we give them another one for city, we're talking about a site plan, how the engineering.
And then I ask the additional question, I say, okay, why are we picking out townhomes and multifamily projects versus just single family detached? Why are those exempt from having to do this extensive additional thing when
Or an undetermined commercial.
it just seems a little bit, why St. George does it, I don't know, but we don't.
Oh, and that,
we don't need
they
it.
haven't adopted that one.
Oh, they're thinking about it.
There's a lot of discussion going on. That is not anywhere in St. George's ordinance.
So Darren, I don't know if the way we administer that right now is by ordinance or not, but Mike Versamak had started that bond principle of they would, basically a joint account. But did we actually, is that in our stuff now?
Yes.
So it exists right now, that is the requirement.
10.53, it sets forth, and I have a cash on deposit bond agreement that we kind of use as a standard form. We'll use it with any bank, FDIC insured financial.
Well, I've liked that principle. We've used it before. It works well. I think it's good. I didn't know if that was something we just.
No, I'm
Or if
wondering
we had it
whether
right.
we may want to, I made a note here as we were talking, we might want to look at revisiting and whether we eliminate surety bonds.
So I noticed in there, as we were scrolling through real quickly, it talks about a cash bond in there, and then you're also talking about how it refers to section 10.5.3.
Yeah.
So we gotta maybe pull it out.
Well, it says, yeah, but really the purpose of its reference to 10.5.3 was to say in the amounts set forth in 10.5.3. But 10.5.3 does talk about cash and a surety or a letter of credit.
Subdivision ordinance.
All right, are we about there? Do you have a little bit
I
more?
think there's not a whole lot more. Go down to where we stopped. Back, go on down. You got through that, come on down. Oh, that's in there right now. Zoning administrator, keep coming.
The one thing planning commission wanted under the dust control, they wanted the dust control and air quality addressed, so to tie it to a land use violation. That was one of the recommendations.
What's the scope here? That's control, post stabilization. Or is this just in construction?
This is in construction, but the SWIFT that carry on.
But your final BMPs are gonna cover that.
So we
But I would-
require in our, overlay, the extraction overlay, we require a air quality control. This is not the same thing.
Yeah.
But we do require that type of, air quality, what are you gonna be doing to help? And it's almost a dust mitigation plan or a fugitive.
Well,
And you could add that just like a cultural.
so Afton, where did you say they suggested putting it?
Under just this dust control right
In the
there.
nuisance?
They were just saying, yeah.
And
The
with a,
land use violation.
with a fine scale put with it as well? I think that's something we should add. Just because looking at what we've had going on out here, there's no teeth to fix it, and the moment the wind starts, we're done.
Yeah.
So the more that we can mitigate that and have a little teeth to make it so they do put water on the ground is perfect. Mayor, I have nothing more other comments.
Keep going, I just want to make sure we cover everything.
Yeah, I think that's it.
It's just a little bit more detail in the grading plans. There's your SWIFT, your dust control plan, your restoration plan.
Proper reference, and in that section, isn't there a fee schedule in that section too that we probably should tie our
Yeah,
uniform
we
fee
did.
schedule to?
We did.
I went through a little mock deal there as far as the calculating the permit fee. I think we need to have somebody explain maybe what to do in St. George or whatever, how to calculate that, because, and after that, I had some conceptual type of things, but I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, staff-wise, as well as be consistent and as well as be legal. To
Well, I think-
administer it, because I don't know, we talked about 600,000 cubic yard compared to a 2,000 cubic yard project, and what the.
And right now,
fee difference would be, it's not.
it's not much in council. The way it's determined right now is we default to the International Building Code, and then we use their scale. I was just thinking, Darren, as we went through this, we probably ought to come up with that checklist box, and then on that add what the grading permit fee is and what our breakdown is for it, and abandon that IBC thing and come up with our own.
Yeah, that IBC thing was nice.
Yeah, it's old.
It's outdated.
That's the last time they did a fee.
Yeah, and our ordinance allows us to update as it updates, but it hasn't changed. And I think having it on that, so that it's very easy.
So there's somewhere in that we're to have that, or maybe not in the ordinance. but
In the fee schedule itself.
Yeah, it needs to be in the fee schedule. I just don't want to have to change the ordinance.
Yeah, that's why I've always been advocating that we just make reference to the fees,
Yeah.
say as found in the uniform fee schedule. So we keep that, we don't, every time we raise a fee, we don't have to go back in and modify the ordinance body of the ordinance. Yeah, every time we go to lower the fee, that's what we do usually is lower fees.
Okay.
So, but you could develop that schedule, and I would sit down and take a look at your staff time that's going into that and cover your costs. That one that's referenced is based on yardage.
Yeah.
And basing it on yardage is scary because if you look at the amount of review you've got to do based on the number of plans that we've asked them for, it can go big time. And so you're going to want to develop some type of fee schedule. And I sent out them about 6 different geographical area example fee schedules of how they did it up on the Wasatch Front, how they're doing it in northern Arizona, how they're doing it in Nevada, just to give them an idea of how they're doing that fee. I would come up with one that works for you guys that's going to cover your costs.
So Heath, are you modifying this or this recommendation?
I've reviewed this and a lot of this is my suggestions in there.
But the ones that we
The
discussed
number
tonight-
one, I'm not a fan of. And that was, I think, it was in there because Bruce Jenkins had said, you may want to look at what City of St. George is considering. And I considered it and Rick's considered it and I don't see the merit in it at all.
So I just want to recap those changes that we discussed here tonight.
So
to make sure
it would
that-
be all the red lines that are in there
Okay.
except for paragraph A1.
Okay, all right. And what about the cultural language? You going to add that?
Adding in A4.
The dust control?
Is there, we gotta put it in there and add it to our nuisance. We gotta put it in both spots.
So I don't think we're in
Oh,
a
perfect.
position to want to
Yeah.
make action on it. No, I think we want to make those changes to it and then bring it forward for action.
This is just a discussion. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a very engaging conversation, especially for those that are not engineers. For those that are engineers, congratulations. But the rest of us,
Rick has a good way of just explaining things.
very well. And we appreciate your time. We really do. Thank you. And we are anxious to get this updated so that we can come in line with the other communities.
You ought to ask Rick one time to describe, or give the description of an effective gravity flow sewer system sometime. But we probably can't talk about that.
Yeah, another time maybe. That might be really, yeah, another stimulus. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to item number. Yes, sir.
I have a question,
Yes.
because I'm just a little bit confused, but that's not uncommon. This particular topic that we've discussed tonight, did that originate with the planning commission? Or did it originate someplace else? And if it originated with the planning commission, why didn't it come to us as a completed possible project that, so we didn't have to, this is supposed to be the business meeting, it's not supposed to be the work meeting, and this is definitely a work meeting subject, and the amount of time we've spent on this, I'm just confused why we're not doing this.
I can tell you that.
Okay.
For one, Rick is obviously the mayor, and he has meetings on Wednesdays as well. And so
Sure.
We're definitely didn't have a meeting on this Wednesday. It would have been the next one, he would have been able to come because he'd be the mayor. Outside of that, this is just a discussion item, and it's such a big ordinance and such a big change, and it affects the fee schedule, and it affects Tokerville in a major way. And so we wanted to give you the opportunity to see it at this meeting, and then also allow us to go through and make those changes, so then you'll see them at the work meeting. And then on the 18th, there will be a public hearing, and that's when you take action.
Okay, so we're gonna see this thing in
Yes.
You'll see
some
it get
completed
into
form
The
and
final form.
before we come to the work meeting next time.
Exactly, yep, so you'll
Okay.
see that before the next work meeting, and then you'll also see if there are any more changes you want us to make, and you'll see those in time for the public hearing. So we just wanted to give you an extra week to see it, and we really wanted Rick to present it, because
Well, I appreciate
it wouldn't
the
have the same
presentation.
effect from me or Darren.
So Chuck,
Where it all originated from? Because you guys asked the planning commission to look at the ordinance.
Yeah.
so this was directed, Chuck, this was directed from us to planning commission. They came up with a plan. This is to help with the grading that we have going on out around the parkway, trying to get everything figured out with
I
that.
understand that.
And planning commission's been in it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this isn't,
Planning commission has already had a public hearing on that as well.
And even though you're looking at this, like, oh, it doesn't look very tidy, this is probably our 8th or 9th version that we've gone through. So then you were like, let's just put it in front of council.
I like it.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on now to number 4, discussion of possible action on ordinance in Title 8, Chapter 6, Section 6, recycling, opt-out rules and guidelines. Afton, do you want to,
This is where we talked about, you know, this.
Yeah, do you want me to give you just a little bit? We received a letter from Faye Reber, who is
Thank you.
counsel for the County Solid Waste District. And we have, when we adopted our last ordinance with regards to trash and recycling, we were under the impression that the Solid Waste District would allow us to have an opt-out plan different than what they had suggested if we wanted to administer it. And so the direction the council had given me is I drafted, and we have in our SharePoint that section that we put in there, which prescribed for a small little window each year, you could opt out. So you could opt out and be out of it. Maybe you could opt back in the following year, but that there was a window, but the expense of keeping track of that and notifying the solid waste district so they had their records right was going to be borne by us. We are informed that that would be a violation. We didn't understand. We were under a different understanding that it was. So what you have is the section. It is in our SharePoint. We don't have this in, it's a discussion possible action. We don't have it in final ordinance form, but if we want, it would take a simple ordinance to stick it in. All we're saying is that that section be deleted in its entirety. That section right there, which is the description of the opt-out, city-operated opt-out plan.
In doing this would not allow our citizens to opt out, period.
They can't anyway.
And
They can't anyway. Under the agreement that we signed with the district and with their provider, there was only a one-time opt-out.
The funny thing is, they were here and they told us.
Oh,
can't
we
do
talked
it. I mean,
about it.
We talked about it, so don't look at me.
And
So-
well,
I wouldn't be over it at the time.
You know, we talked about
Faye
it.
Reber was.
Faye was here and Sandy
And then Faye
McDonald.
was the one who wrote us a letter saying, you can't do this.
Yeah.
You need to stop.
But part of the reason we approved that was because they gave us a way for our citizens to make a choice.
And we thought, hey, you know what, it might be a little bit of an extra administrative cost, but we want to give our citizens that opportunity to say yes or no at many different points in time instead of the first 90 days before the program
One
started.
thing that's important to note too is no one has actually tried to opt out.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. So our
So
citizens,
we wanted to
even though we
provide-
gave them the opportunity, which we shouldn't have, we haven't had any citizens exercise the option.
Sandy opted out.
Except for the,
I-
but I think Sandy probably opted out at the beginning.
At the beginning.
That's when, yeah.
Yeah, she did it initially.
But ever since then,
But
we've
I
had
don't know
nobody
that.
submit for it.
I don't know that the town knows there was an annual opt-out. And I don't know.
We
that
probably hadn't done the best
We
of
haven't.
advertising it, like, hey, next month is gonna be your opt-out
Yeah.
window. Better let us know or lose it for another year.
well, if it's just deleting this, then I think, and we have to do it, right? Because the district that we're a part of says we can't have this provision in our code, right? Then I'm looking, let's have a motion to delete this section so we can come in compliance with the district's, the solid waste district's rules.
Is there an alternative to keep fighting with the district over this issue that they originally agreed to?
I went back and read, I went back and read the agreement as a city that we had to sign on to with the district and the provider. And I think we've already agreed that we wouldn't.
I saw the signatures, yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know if it's worth the fight. And the fact that when I hear that we've done this for 2 years and we haven't had any opt-outs in both opt-out windows, I'd probably say,
So Heath, if we go back, and Justin, you probably remember this, if the house sells and it has a blue can, it kept a blue can, isn't that right? But if somebody bought and whoever moved in just got it, and that's part of what we had the discussion about. Right.
yeah, new home,
But if
new
it was
homes is a perfect example, a new home that's being built.
But a new construction home, they were not,
They get that chance. They get a 90-day window.
it's if they bought a home that had the existing blue can signed up for it, they kept it. That was the deal. Okay. Right.
But like the city of Washington, you could opt in, and then once you could opt out. And then your price on which you have to pay for the weekend is based on how many people are in it. So now.
That's changed.
Yeah,
That's changed?
Yeah, it's countywide.
That
the
was
same.
renegotiated when the district renegotiated their new contract with the provider. They didn't want to have that uncertainty.
Right.
So one of the ways the district got the best price that they could was to agree to a one-time opt-out, which would then lock existing users into either they're doing recycling or they're not. And that made the provider feel comfortable and so that they could agree to the pricing that the district gets. So yeah, that was a thing in the past. Yeah.
So we're locked, so we as citizens are locked in at a set price.
A set, no, it goes up every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes up every year and that's built into there. It talks about it. The blue can goes up and the gray can goes up every year.
So I think we need a motion.
I motion that we delete this portion of our ordinance.
Yeah, motion be to adopt an ordinance omitting that section from our current ordinance.
Okay.
Ordinance being the form approved by the city attorney. I'll just take that and I'll plug it into an ordinance and we'll have the mayor sign it.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries with one nay vote. All right, let's go now to item number 5. Adopt, we're looking at our resolution. Actually, this is a new vehicle policy. I don't think we have to have a resolution here. We just wanted everyone to know what the new vehicle policy is. Afton, do you want to briefly go over that for everybody? And then we're doing that allows for these sorts of internal city operating policies and procedures to be adopted by the mayor. So do you want to just outline briefly for everyone's information so they know exactly?
Yeah, so we had a resolution for our vehicle policy already. So we went through and just, we eliminated the personal use out of it. We brought this before council. It was already in resolution form from before, so we just put it back in front of you. And like the mayor said, we could just adopt it. I mean, we could just do it as policy, but we already had a resolution, so we just want to put it in front of you. So there's been a lot of discussion about this vehicle policy. We did eliminate the use of the personal use of the trucks, the public work trucks. And we also, they had previously been taking them home and coming back. We just kind of talked about it and just thought it's probably better if they're just parked here. And the guys were fine with it. They all have their own personal trucks. So, so 2 things with this vehicle policy that are happening is, one, and it has to do with the budget. We get a lot of feedback at the city saying that we've purchased $90,000 trucks. We have not purchased those trucks. They are on a lease. Those trucks are $5,500 per year total. They do not track mileage. We are not required to do mileage logs or anything like that. So that is the actual cost. It's $5,500 per truck. So we got 2 of those. The lease came up for renewal, so we got 2 of those, but they'll be here next week. I'm sure people will say the same thing, that we purchased $90,000 trucks. We did not. So yeah, behind the gate. Our public works are parking behind the gate. So.
Wasn't that long ago with the public works truck.
Right.
We ended up, like, the fee to pay it off, it was a disaster. And then we ended up paying more than what we had agreed to in council and tried to figure out what had gone on.
Yeah.
So my concern is, are we going down that same path again, or do we have it?
So, yeah, so these are not, these at the end of the year, you would have the option to purchase, but correct. Yep, and they're $5,500 with the price of trucks. It's better to lease them right at this exact moment than do that. So yeah, so total for both of those trucks, the entire year, there's no mileage. We're not going to be over on our mileage. They're $5,500.
Just from is, I look at what even though it's $5,500, if we're not selling them, then why aren't we getting work trucks? We're getting trucks with leather seats, carpet. They are dolled up.
So we called, right. Exactly. We even tried to get a list from Ash Creek of any that they were potentially selling. They're selling them for more than they bought them for. We contacted the water district to see about getting their trucks. Yeah. It's the same price regardless. It doesn't matter if you got something that was 20 years old or now. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it has a sunroof, if it has leather, if it's lifted, it doesn't matter. They're the same exact price. There's one price and it's $5,500. So yeah, that's been a lot. When I have people come in, quite honestly, That's,
If we lease it,
yeah,
$5,500, and then next year we lease it again. Each year when it comes up for renewal, there's a buyout option. That residual goes down. And all these, I mean, City of St. George does it all the time.
yeah.
They make money. On this government pricing program that they get, they'll lease them for 3 years.
And then purchase them out, yeah. Which is the same option that we have. So, yeah, so we have one Ford that's going back and then 2 Chevys that are coming next week. But people will see that. So that is something that they need to know that we did not spend, diesel. They're both diesel. And and they are the 1 tons. Yeah, whether it was a 3/4 or 1 ton. So we can pull the backhoe, we could pull any equipment. Right now, we only have 1 truck to pull the equipment. JD's diesel. So,
Have to have health cards, medical cards.
yeah, and yep. So Lance is taking the CDL. He's the one that didn't, so he's going to take that. It's like $400, get a CDL. So yeah, so we're definitely on top of that. But that's one thing I just wanted to say. So we wanted to just put this before you. If we wanted to clarify that, let you know what's happening with the leases, and then that just as a matter of policy, we are not having them drive them for any sort of personal use. No passengers. We did the same thing that Ash Creek did. Again, same thing as So. Mhm. Yep. They just drive here. Yep, and do that. So. Yep.
And the skid loader, right?
Mhm.
Though that iron is hard to get. Are we already in the process of moving forward, getting?
They gave us a price. That's actually on for our budget discussion for next month on the 18th, and we're bringing you the actual prices. So that's what they're researching right now. So yeah. So the vehicle policy, yeah. So that'll be on the next budget hearing in May 18th. May 18th. So.
I do want to go to Heath, and I just want to make sure that this wasn't policy format, resolution format, but based on our prior decisions by the city, I don't think we need to make a new policy change, right? Do
we need, that's the question. Do we need to adopt this as a resolution because we already have it, or is it fine? Okay. We just want to make sure we're doing it right.
All right. Okay. Number 6, discussion and possible approval of the. That's you. Tell us about it.
So,
I move to approve it.
no, I'm actually thinking, the way things are going, I don't know if I want it approved right now. I might, as we build it, I might get it ratified when I get it done. Because things might change just because of availability and certain things. Does that make sense?
Well,
this is the basic plan we're going to stick to, but if something comes up, I don't want to have to come back and ask for, I don't know. I don't have to ask.
You
Just
take
do what
a
I want.
conceptual
Yeah,
plan
park
and
plan
build
is
from a conceptual plan.
conceptual.
Is this conceptual?
You don't have to build it exactly to the size.
And do we
Well, if that's
need,
the case at all, let's
do we
adopt it.
need the resolution to adopt this, or do we just go forward?
Well, the only comment that I made to
Yeah.
Councilman Sipp.
I brought it up last week and nobody liked it.
Nobody liked moving the splash pad to the other side? Okay.
Because you go to all the other parks, there's splash pad and the playground, you can see through the splash pad to see the playground. There's not like, if you're moving on 2 sides and you have kids, you got kids over here and kids over here, how do you watch them both at the same time? If you have a splash pad and you go with one line of sight and see both of them, then.
You're gonna have a lot of sand traffic between the
No sand.
pavilion. No sand in the playground?
That's wood chips. It's already there.
Okay, I'm outvoted.
So do we need a resolution? I don't think we do
We can adopt it, and if it's conceptual, if
You
we have
don't need a
to.
resolution to adopt. You guys can just adopt it this is simply a plan.
Right.
A conceptual plan.
Yeah. Well,
It's not ordinance.
Perfect. Well, then if I have to change it here and there, I don't.
So you just say you hereby adopt the plan. I make a motion to adopt the Westfield. Okay.
Go ahead, Rachel.
then let's do that.
I make a motion to adopt the Westfield Park plan.
I would second the motion.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. All right, that ends our business
Can I
portion.
ask one question about that?
Yes.
No, this is for Heath.
Yeah.
Does that give us the opportunity to solicit bids for that?
We don't
The
have to
adoption
have,
of the park plan? I mean, it's a capital facilities project. Does
Yeah,
that give us,
well-
is them adopting it, does that give us now?
Next time we go to update our formal, our citywide parks and recreation plan, we need to make sure that it has all these components conceptually in it. Are you asking about, can we go out and get bids for
Yeah,
the?
that's what I'm saying, right? Like,
Yeah,
if we go,
absolutely,
we go out and get bids.
absolutely.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
All right, up on our events, we have some things coming up. Spring Community Cleanup, April 22nd, 25. We also have the Washington County Water Conservancy District Flip Blitz Landscape Project, May 19. And of course, Farmers Market, like was spoken of before, that'll begin May 21st, and be the third Saturday thereafter of each month through October. All right, if there is nothing further, let's have a motion to go into closed session.
So moved. Mayor, I'd move that we go into a closed session for the discussion of and/or purchase of real property, including any form of water rights or shares. Second.
We have motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you all for coming. Excuse you at this time. I didn't think so. Do?
Roll call.
Closed session.